Eddie Dempsey, why are we here?
Well, we're here because over in that place down the road, MPs are debating a second reading of a bill the government's bringing in to restrict the right for people in this country to take industrial action. And the reason they're doing that is because they've lost the argument on inequality in the country at large. And as we've seen with the second jobs brigade over there, these people are bought and paid for by the corporations. They do their bidding. They represent the corporate interests and not the interests of the people in this country. And that's why they use taxpayers' money to indemnify employers from losses when we go into strike action. That's why they brought laws in to allow agency workers to break strikes. And that's why they're bringing these laws in. And this is an attack on civil liberties. It's not about left wing and right wing. This is an attack on the civil freedoms of the British people to withdraw their labour. And that's why we're calling on everybody, Democrats, trade unionists, civil society activists, to come together to resist these draconian measures.
Why do you think the government's doing this?
Well, they do it. Oh, look, we've seen in recent days, most of these politicians over there, they're bought and paid for by the corporate lobby. That's whose bidding they're doing. We've been through 4 years, some of our members, of pay freezes, worked through the health emergency, and now this government is forcing wage restraint in the country at a time of high inflation in order to protect the profits of their paymasters. That's what this is about. They've lost the argument, they're losing the industrial fight, so now they're trying to change the law to protect the profits of the rich at the expense of ordinary people in this country.
How would you describe the government's attitude to the labour movement?
Well, draconian. I mean, look, right now the International Labour Organisation does a global index on trade union freedoms. We're on a level with Russia in the UK now. That's before they pass this bill. They're seeking to constrict workers and force them to break their own strikes. Now, you imagine you vote in an industrial action ballot to take strike action, to withdraw your labour, which is a human right. You can be named and forced to either break your own strike or go on the dole. That's what this government is doing. It's an assault on our freedoms, and that's why we've got to come together to protect ourselves from it.
How will that affect the named, say this legislation goes ahead, how would that affect the named worker who's forced to make that choice?
Say that again, mate.
How would that affect the named worker who's forced to make that choice between losing their job or breaking the strike? What would that be like for that worker?
Well, you can only imagine. So it could be the case that you're striking against an employer that wants to bring in unsafe work practices. You could be facing a question, do I protect my safety at work, or do I go meekly back to work and break the strike, or go on a dole? That's the choices they're going to try and force people to make. But what this is really about is right now we've seen profits at the highest rate we've seen in many years, and at the same time workers can't afford to make ends meet. Today and over the past year, you've seen workers get themselves organised and start to fight back. And so this government is trying to crush their rights and protect the profits of their paymasters, the big corporations.
What's particularly striking about this is the government says they're trying to protect minimum service levels across all these sectors, but they're not meeting those. There is no minimum service level in the NHS in anything.
No, well, they cut services. So first they underfund public services, then they collapse and stop working, then they cut the services, and then they cut the funding until eventually the private sector's gobbled it all up. And that's what we're seeing in our NHS, that's what we've seen in our railway, that's why we've got the highest energy prices in the world, I saw in the newspaper today. That's why we've got the highest rail fares in Western Europe, and that's why we've got the worst public services going, because they're underfunded and the workers who want to stand up for the institutions they're working in are being crushed.
Rishi Sunak says he believes in people's right to strike. Do you believe him?
If he believed in people's right to strike, he wouldn't be trying to take it off them, would he?
Have you got anything else you want to add?
Just said, look, we're not prepared to stand idly by and watch our freedoms be taken away. And we want to organise a fight back of civil society, trade unions, Democrats, people who love freedom. We want to bring people together and resist these draconian laws.
Thank you, mate. Thank you very much for your time, Eddie.